If ever there was a thumbnail that would get me the most hate, I feel like this is the one. I feel like I'm going to be judged for this one. Hello and welcome to FTTR, I'm Hugh McQuaid, and today we're doing something a little bit different. We are talking about my biggest hot take in professional wrestling. That's right, we are going out big. We are talking about my biggest controversial opinion regarding pro wrestling, and yeah, as it says in the title, you probably know where this is going, and it's probably going to get, he's probably going to get angry down in those comments. But I think it's a good discussion to have. And yeah, before we dive into that, please hit subscribe, please like this video, please comment your thoughts down below, and I'll try and reply to every single one of them as we dive into this. So, my biggest hot take, where this came from, where this video idea came from, is that I was listening to Wrestle Talk podcast, and I believe it was Ollie said in the Jey Uso one they just did, like on Friday, that he believed that the Bloodline Saga is the best story that they've lived through in professional wrestling. And I heard that and I was like, I don't agree. And I feel like a lot of people feel this way about the Bloodline. Not the way I feel they think it's the best story that has been told in pro wrestling. But I disagree. And my hot take is the Bloodline Saga story, whatever you want to call it, is insanely overrated. Now, I did a video on this I had to look up in 2023, I think, a pretty old, probably very bad video, in which I talked about why I think it's overrated. But the way I want to discuss it now is I don't just think it's overrated, like extremely overrated. There have been better stories in this time period that I think have been better than the Bloodline. They have been more concise, they have been more precise, they have been more emotional than the Bloodline. But first of all, we're going to talk about the Bloodline Saga as a whole, and why I think it's overrated is because I think only a third of it was good. You look at how long it went on for. It went on from the pandemic to like 2024, so that is a 4-year span of stuff that we had. And I get it, we all had the big shock when Roman Reigns turned heel. We had the pandemic, Thunderdome stuff with Jey Uso, Jimmy Uso, all that good stuff. Then you had just a load of stuff that wasn't good. You had an endless Brock Lesnar feud with Roman Reigns. You had an entire year where he was basically not there. So that's at least probably like, a third of the story that isn't particularly gripping and isn't particularly good. I don't think the Brock Lesnar stuff was good. I don't think the Finn Balor stuff was good. I don't really think a lot of the sort of early stuff, the Edge stuff and the Bryan Danielson stuff, even though the match was great, the triple threat they had, I don't think it was like revolutionary. The reason people think that the Bloodline is so amazing is when Sami Zayn joined, and sort of that section leading up to Sami Zayn's turn, which I will admit was great. It was fantastic. The stuff with Sami Zayn, chef's kiss. It was awesome. The stuff with Cody Rhodes, the second time, with The Rock inserting himself in there, that was all good fun and carnage. But I think that overall, 2/3 of Roman's run and this Bloodline stuff wasn't very good. And if you're can you even call the Cody Rhodes ending the end? Because you then had all the stuff with Solo Sikoa, which I'm going to be honest, I also didn't think was very good. I didn't think that the sort of Jacob Fatu turn, the new Bloodline, the introduction of Tangaloa, Tamatonga, I don't think that was very good. I think people were over the Bloodline at that point, and it just felt like overkill. They may be getting back on track with the Jey Uso stuff they're doing now, but 2/3 of it I don't think were good. I think you have a third of the Bloodline story that is great, fantastic stuff, but 2/3 of it is not. And I don't think that that is how you can necessarily define the greatest wrestling story ever, because if I have a trilogy, for example, where only one of the films is good, I don't think you call that a good trilogy, I'm trying to think of a trilogy that has just one good film and then the sequels were terrible, but I can't think off the top of my head. Closest I can get is the new Star Wars trilogy. The Force Awakens, pretty great. Last Jedi people hated, and Rise of Skywalker people hated. Would you call that a good trilogy? No, you would not. So That's my argument just on the basis of the storytelling that the Bloodline presented. Where I get even more passionate about this is because I think in both WWE and outside of WWE, in the time of the Bloodline, there have been better stories that have been told. We'll start with the WWE ones. So this technically wasn't, at the time of the Bloodline, but I think it's a story within the last 10 years that was told that for some reason now seems to get a lot of hate, but Gargano and Ciampa was better than the Bloodline stuff. Yes, it had melodramatic elements, but so did the Bloodline stuff. And it had better matches. It had more personal matches. It had more emotion. And it had a more satisfying conclusion, in my opinion. Conclusion, by that I mean the match with Adam Cole, Ciampa, and Gargano embracing on the stage. Now, I know they did one final beat, which was weird. People didn't know what they were doing in the pandemic. But at the same time, the Bloodline continued after the match with Cody Rhodes. So it's all the same. I thought that was a better story than the Bloodline. I also think you could make an argument that Drew versus Punk was a better story than the Bloodline. It fell apart a little bit in the middle when they were arguing over the bracelet, but to me that had more passion, more fire, more energy behind it, and it wasn't long and drawn out. I think that was, in my opinion, a better storyline than the Bloodline. So those are the two WWE stories that I think were told better than the Bloodline. And this is where, I'm probably going to get the most hate if it's WWE fans watching this, but if we're looking outside of WWE, Punk versus MJF is, in my opinion, the greatest wrestling story that I've lived through in terms of a beginning chapter to an ending. When Punk first arrived in AEW, MJF came out, went to shake his hand, and Punk rejects it. To the end, the dog collar match, that to me, those months are perfect wrestling storytelling. The promos, the matches, everything that was done there. Probably my favourite story in pro wrestling, tied with Gargano and Ciampa for how much I love those stories. I think you could make an argument that Kenny Omega and Hangman Page, their arc, their story that they had, was more personal, more fulfilling than the Bloodline story. Again, that sort of lost its way towards the end when you thought they were going to do Hangman versus Kenny, but they went Christian and they did Hangman at Full Gear. So maybe that went on a little bit too long, but Hangman had to go off for personal reasons. That to me, and Hangman's character arc through that story, was better than a lot of the stuff that was in the Bloodline. And the final story that I will talk about that happened around this time, and it's an independent wrestling story, was Cara Noir and Spike Trivet that happened in Progress Wrestling. That to me is one of the best and greatest stories that's ever been told in a wrestling ring. The personal sort of vendetta that Spike Trivet had to Cara Noir, the sort of decharacterization of Cara Noir, having to lose his mask, his first time talking, saying the words "I quit." There was so much heart and sort of vulnerability in the transition between Cara Noir and Tom Dawkins in this feud, and it's a feud that I highly recommend you check out if you get the chance. That story was amazing. It's one of the best stories ever told in a wrestling ring. And I think that's what sort of puts me over the edge on these stories, is they feel more personal. I get the sort of grand spectacle of the Bloodline story, but over 4 years, having probably a year and a half that was great, I don't think is acceptable to be the greatest story of the generation, or however you want to say it. I don't think that's the case. Now, what I will say is the performances, amazing. Some of the matches, amazing. I think probably the best match to come out of the Bloodline Saga was probably the Elimination Chamber match between Sami and Roman, because Sami's the heart of it. I love Cody and everything like that, but I think Sami was the one. That was the beating heart of the Bloodline, and when that sort of got taken away, you didn't have that heart anymore. You had Cody going in there, and I was very happy when Cody won, but the Sami stuff was so great, and the Sami stuff wasn't even the longest portion of the Bloodline stuff. Like I said, Finn, Brock, just that stuff was not good. And yeah, that's my hot take. My hot take is that the Bloodline story is insanely overrated, and there have been way better stories told in pro wrestling in this generation. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you agree with me? Do you not? Let me know down in the comments below, and I'll try to reply to every single one of them. Thank you all ever so much for your support, and have a nice day.